resume recording. There we are, up and running. So yeah, if you don't want to be seen on screen, make sure your camera stays off. If you're not worried, then please do put your camera on, because we do like to see everybody. So yes, this is our second co-development workshop, and we have to make sure that we thank our funders, because we're very grateful for the funding that they've given us for this Blue Recovery project. The Blue Recovery project I'll be talking about in a little bit. Welcome to anybody who's not had anything to do with the Rockpool project before. Just a quick run through of how it's going to work out today. So I'm starting the introduction now, and I'll be chatting for the next 10 minutes or so. And then once I've finished, we'll be going on to look at 3 possible topics that we can focus our citizen science work on in 2023. And we'll be rotating between each of them. Each of them will have 15 minutes each. Hopefully we're looking for about 10 minutes worth of talk or presentation from each of our designated experts, and then there'll be some time at the end of it for discussion and any questions. After those 3 sessions, we'll have a 10-minute break to give ourselves a rest from the screen, and then we'll be coming back for a final discussion and a vote on which one we want to choose to go forward. And after that, I'll just give a little brief outline of what the next steps will be in that process. So, first use of Mentimeter is we don't really have time to go through everybody individually and say hello to everybody, but it would be nice to get a feel for who we got in the room today. So if you're able to use your Mentimeter, this is a good test as well, please leave a message saying hello to everybody, and a little bit about where you're from and your involvement with the Rockpool project, if any. Make sure you put your name in there as well. Yeah, it's working. So yeah, hi Christoph. I'll whilst we're waiting for everybody to say hello, I shall give special mention to the 3 people who've very kindly agreed to look into the 3 topics that we're considering today, and when to present them to you guys. We have Laura Coles, who's our community director at the Rockpool project, and also a researcher at Exeter University, based down here in Penryn. Say hi, Laura.
Hi, everyone.
There we go. And we also have Christoph Patton, who's Science Director at the Rockpool project and a researcher at Durham University.
Hello.
Is it Durham University or University of Durham?
I think officially it's University of Durham, but the marketing name is Durham University. So there's a technical answer for you.
It's complicated. And last but by no means least, we have Kate, who's a ranger at the Marine Park in Plymouth, and also has been involved with the Rockpool project for, well, maybe 4 years now, isn't it, Kate? Is that right? No one's counting by the looks of it.
Yeah. Doesn't quite as long as that. I think it just feels that way.
You're part of the furniture one way or another. Cool, and thanks very much to everybody for saying hello on the screen. Oh yeah, I can scroll it down here a bit so we can see everybody popping up. And yeah, special thanks for people to join us for the first time. We're always looking to recruit new people to the project, and we know that we're going to need as many people as possible, whatever we choose this evening. Now, for the benefit of you guys who are new, just a little bit about the Rockpool project itself. As we mentioned at the start, it's set up by Alan and myself nearly 5 years ago now. We've got our 5th birthday coming up in March, which is quite exciting. And the purpose of the Rockpool project is to excite and educate people about marine wildlife, but also to learn about marine wildlife together. I'm a marine biologist and have been involved in academic research for a number of years. and Alan is a teacher, and we've combined our skills to grow this project. And with the benefit of so many people and most people getting involved voluntarily, we've really sort of come a long way in that time. So the best example of that is this project that we're talking about today, which is the Blue Recovery Project. See if I can move on to the next slide for that, which is funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, a 2-year project working with communities in Falmouth and Plymouth, designed to get people involved in marine biology that have never done that kind of thing before, and to build connections between us and our marine environment and with each other. And as part of that, we go to the beach every month, and we've been doing that since the start of 2022. And we now have 2 really, really good teams, very knowledgeable teams in Falmouth and Plymouth. And this project that we're talking about now, the co-development work, is looking to progress that and make use of everybody's skills, and to see if we can actually collectively in 2023 learn more about our marine environment in a way that's going to help protect it. Excuse my phone, I'm just turning that off. Yeah, so I basically just said all this. So the citizen science aspect of the project is getting that community focus into the research that we do. And it's looking to do it from the point of view that right from the very start, we want to get people involved, and we've already done that. I'll explain a little bit about what we've sort of how we've progressed so far and how we've got to the point we're at the moment. This is the framework that we're using to actually build the entire project. At the moment, we're on what's called the identification stage. And that's all about finding out what sort of things matter to people. We started off with like making it completely open and getting the views of as many people that we could possibly get. And we've steadily decided to find out which of those ideas are more popular or more meaningful to people. And we've got to the stage now that we have our top 3 ideas to choose from. I won't go into the next steps just now, but we'll be going through these 4 stages as we progress through the project and looking to end at the end of 2023. So the objectives of today's session: have a quick review of the results of the consultation so far with the community, discuss the top 3 ideas in detail, and Laura, Kate and Christoph will help us do that. And then we're going to end up, and today we are going to vote on which one we're going to do for next year. And that will be the final decision. So quite a bit of responsibility in our collective hands. What's decided today is going to have a big impact on our 2023. So the way the consultation is all about basically asking people and getting people's views about things in various different ways. And the initial way that we did it is just to send a Google form out to people, which, amongst other things, some of the other things it addressed was just asking people what their motivations are and things like that, which was quite helpful. And then the last question on it was just an open-ended question of like, what would you like us to do? And people were able to write as much or as little as they wanted there. And so we started together in a word cloud, and that gives the easiest way of actually summarizing all that information. And as you can see, there was a bit of focus, quite a strong focus on pollution, and particularly water pollution and its impact on rockpool wildlife. There were other things as well, but that thing came through very strongly. And we took those results from the online forms and we used them to build into our first workshop. And we had some of our long-standing members of the Rockpool Project and some of our new volunteers who've come in through the Blue Recovery Project, who are called our Blue Recovery Rangers, based in Falmouth and Plymouth. We met halfway. And we used this Mentimeter thing that you guys have just been using to go through a stepwise process and people to actually articulate some specific ideas of what we can do. And we came up with quite a few. some more there. All of this information and the stuff that I've just been discussing is available on our website. I wrote a blog about it all. So if you go to the info section of our website and go to blogs, you'll be able to see all of that information. And then in order to get an idea of which ones were most popular, we had an online poll on our website, and this received well over 200 votes. And so we're delighted with the response to that. And these are the results of the poll. And as you can see, we had our three top topics were sewage impact of sewage on rockpool wildlife, climate change and ocean acidification, which I think the original question posed was looking at the tidal range, so how it might impact how high or low on the beach a species is. But I think we've decided to broaden that out to consider climate change and ocean acidification more generally tonight. And then an interesting one, which was posed asking about potential positive things that we can do to improve biodiversity or ecosystem health in our rockpool habitats. So those are the three that we're going to be discussing tonight. And that's about it from me. We're going to go through the three of them now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow, I think we've got Laura up first, and Laura's going to be discussing climate change and ocean acidification. I shall leave Mentimeter on, and you can use that to post questions or comments. And I'll be able to pick them up here. You won't be able to see them on your screen yourself because Laura will be sharing her screen. And after Laura, when you've finished, I'll wipe that and we'll start again with the next person. Okay. All right. So can I hand over to you then, Laura?
Ben, can I just quickly interrupt? Laura,
Please.
Sorry, there's quite a few people who've joined late, so it might just be worth recapping what Mentimeter is and how to join.
Okay. Would you like to do that, Al? Because you're there.
Well, happy to. Yeah. If you've just joined, you don't know what we're talking about in terms of Menti. At the top of the screen, there's two. Well, actually, there's one option now. If you could just on your phone go to menti.com, pop in the code. If you've never used it before, it's brilliant. It's a live interface where we can send messages and do votes and stuff like that. And like Ben said, that means we can make comments as Laura's talking, and then we can refer back to them all collectively at the end.
Thanks, Al. Okay, take it away, Laura.
Hopefully I'll be able to share my screen. It worked a minute ago.
Always works in practice, doesn't it?
I know. Okay, hopefully it's coming up now.
We can see that fine. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, so for topic one, we have climate change and ocean acidification. This is a really wide-ranging topic, as Ben said, but often these two factors get grouped together because they're both caused or contributed to by rising CO2 levels. So a really important thing to consider at the moment. In the context of rockpool species, we're interested in how the changing temperatures impact rockpool temperatures. So rockpools are subject to both air and water temperature inputs, and also how the acidification of water affects the rockpool species themselves. So very briefly, just to start off, I just want to say thank you to everyone who helped out with the topic. So everything that I'm about to present has been contributed to by yourselves. So thank you very much for your help with that. So in our research, we found that British rockpool species have been shown to move northwards in response to increasing temperatures in the southern ranges, and this is something that's called a range shift. Acidification can affect how well organisms with exoskeletons, so things like gastropods, crabs, can make and maintain their skeletons. And because of a process called calcium carbonate dissolution, this affects their shells, so it might mean that their shell thickness changes. Changing temperatures can change the timing of reproductive events and of the time that an organism matures. And this disrupts their natural cues and causes mismatches in predator and prey. So the timings that prey should be reproducing and then be eaten by that predator might change depending on how warm or cold it is. And so all of these impacts affect really the way that species interact with each other. So things like shell thickness can impact competitive interactions. So if you haven't got good enough armor as a crab to fight other crabs, your competitive interaction might be changed. And that means that the factors can fundamentally alter our rock pool community. So it makes it a really important topic if we can tap into some of that and see how that's having an effect. So just generally, with this topic as a whole, these are the sort of main pros and cons that we brought out. Overall, it's a really important topic, but it is quite difficult to separate impacts of these two factors versus other things that might be having an effect on a rock pool. So often in studies of this kind of thing, it happens in a controlled environment, by which I mean a lab or something called a mesocosm, which is basically a mocked up rock pool, where other factors can be removed from consideration, and you can just look at impacts of temperature or impacts of pH, ocean acidification on the species. And often, especially for temperature studies, it happens over the long term. So we have quite a lack of baseline data for this kind of thing. And obviously we're looking about a year's study. So those are things that we'll need to consider for this topic, is sort of how we can make this work despite that. So because it's such a wide ranging topic, and I wanted to give you an idea of what we could actually do and what it would actually mean for us if we were to take it on, we've all come up with 3 questions that we can have a little look at. So question number 1 something that we could look at in this topic would be how increased extreme weather events impact rock pool communities. So with climate change, there's predicted to be more extreme weather events. So things like named storms and storm surges and things that could physically affect our rock pool species. We might expect to see something like a scour effect, where species are actually washed away from the rock pools or pulled away from their habitats after those events. Or increased pollution due to runoff and nutrient pollution. And so to study this, we'd need to carry out abundance and distribution data like pre and post severe weather. So we could look at something like seaweeds to see if they're scoured away after these intense periods of really heavy wave action, heavy rain, and see if after those events that coverage is less. The cons of doing something like this would mainly probably be to do with the timing of the surveys. So we're looking at regular blue recovery events, and obviously this kind of weather phenomenon, it's not going to be regular. But generally speaking, there's obviously going to be a seasonal effect. So I'm sure everyone's noticed over the last couple of months how the weather has been. We would have had ample opportunity to study this kind of thing, even within our scheduled blue recovery events. And also we could potentially offer additional surveys to people. And it depends on how quickly the communities recover after events like this. So it might be that it takes them quite a while after an event, especially if you're looking at something like a seaweed, which is growing slowly, to sort of recover from it. So there are things that we could do to potentially tackle that and still answer that question. A potential another avenue that we could go down would be looking at ocean acidification specifically. So as I mentioned, it's generally agreed that ocean acidification causes changes to shell structure. So weaker shells can make prey more vulnerable, and something like weaker claws on a crab could make it harder for a crab to get that prey. So for our purposes, we could look at gastropods, so something like periwinkles or something like that, and look at their shell measurements. So we can create an index of their shell size by taking various measurements of the shell. And then we can take pH measurements of the water, so we could compare between sites, between Plymouth and Falmouth, and compare different pHs throughout the year to see if that has an impact on how the shells are presenting in those species. And it's definitely an important thing to be doing. So as I mentioned, those predator-prey interactions are really key as to rock pool health as a whole. You know, the ecosystem only works if those predator-prey reactions are balanced as they should be. So yeah, it'd be a really important thing for us to look at. The cons are that we found out through our research that not all species sort of have the same impact under ocean acidification. So even within gastropods, there's a very species-specific impact going on. And also we've got quite a small scale that we're talking about here, but I mean, that will be the same case for any of our studies really. So that's more of a general thing. Yeah, so again, that's something that we could look at with ocean acidification specifically. And then our final question would be temperature specific, something that we could look at in terms of climate change. So do these upper shore species show any behavioural response to changing temperatures? So we could look at the distribution and the abundance of something, again, maybe like a gastropod, like a limpet or a periwinkle, and how that changes with temperature. Temperature data is really readily available. We could get water and climate data there and have both of those factored in. And then the one thing that we would probably need to be making sure of in that case would be our position on the shore. So we might need to use something like a GPS position marker to make sure that we were actually seeing those changes, because they might be quite slight and difficult to detect. But other than that, it's not something that we would need specialist training for. It'd be quite easily achievable and testable. Yeah, and again, as I mentioned at the start, everything that you've got to consider is whether that is purely an impact of temperature, or if there's any other factors that could be having an effect there. So if you're looking seasonally, as the temperatures go down, you might actually see that those species are retreating from the higher shore, but that could be because there's more storm action that there's causing them to have a harder time up there. So there's always these other factors that we're going to have to be factoring in. I would just definitely say that all of these are just to give you an idea as to how we could sort of tackle this topic and sort of put it into reality, because I think overall it's a little bit overwhelming as a big topic. So they're all subject to change, and if you've got ideas, then I'm sure we'd all love to hear them if we were to take this topic forward. So yeah, just thank you to everyone for your help with it, and thanks for listening, and I'd be keen to hear what you think.
Thank you so much. Oh, round of applause there, Krista. Thank you very much. That was really helpful. Thanks, Laura. Has anyone got any questions or comments? I see there's some on the chat. I haven't actually looked at them yet.
If I stop sharing, will it help it go back to? Will we be able to see?
There aren't any comments on the Mentimeter. Oh, there is. Sorry, we can do that. Yeah, maybe I can share. If you're happy to put your name on your comment, please do that as well, so we know who's provided it.
That was me.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Cindy.
that's
So,
all right.
I'll read your question for you if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
So Cindy's asking, hard to control what affects pH of the water as rainwater, etc. alters that as well. Would it be possible to invest in some permanent temperature loggers? Well, we do have some budgets within the Blue Recovery that we can look to allocate whichever way we go. Not a huge amount, so I don't know any idea of how much one of them would cost at all. I don't know.
I don't personally know, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think we can. I think we're in the sort of area that we will have some money to do things sort of on the cheap-ish. So we won't have money to buy really expensive equipment. So hopefully there'll be some way we can sort of help crack that particular issue. Have you got any thoughts, Laura? Sorry, it was actually your question, but I thought I'd answer it because it's from the funding point of view.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's useful. Thoughts in terms of, I think that we probably could get away without using a temperature logger, because I think you're looking more at, like I said, like climate data and sea temperature data that we could get without having to do it ourselves, to create more of an overall picture rather than just sort of rock pool by rock pool what the temperature is at that time in the rock pool. But again, I don't know everyone's thoughts are on that. Yeah.
Laura, this might be a good point to just introduce actually Catherine, who we're delighted has joined us, and colleagues from Green Minds. Catherine actually had a meeting with Ben and I recently, and is works for Plymouth University in Green Minds, and told us all about these fantastic digital toolkits that can monitor things such as temperature. And I wonder, Catherine, if you'd be happy to do a much better job than me explaining what they are just for a minute or so, because this seems to link perfectly with this question.
Yeah, so I'm from the university, from the School of Art, Design and Architecture, and actually you'll see there's Ashita and Marcin Marcin, who is also in the call, so they're research assistants on the project.
Oh, brilliant.
And Green Minds is a sort of £3 million project in the city, and we're just a partner in it, but the city council leads. It's a natural infrastructure, and our bit is sort of revealing hidden nature through data, and sort of we've actually been creating this sort of, hopefully, a citizen science toolkit, but which has mainly been for parks, as in the green parks. But when we had a chat with Al and Ben, we were like, well, actually, we really want to see how we could use it for the blue, for the sea as well. So it uses an open source platform, so it's basically, it uses like quite low power. So that means so we can get pH sensors, also pollution sensors in terms of measuring. And I think one of the questions we've got is we don't actually know what are the bits we need to check that it needs to they need to measure. Like I'm not really an expert in water quality to know what, but we can definitely get temperature sensors. We can also probably get like cameras, mini underwater cameras, if you wanted to sort of see, I don't know again how exactly what you might want to see, but the toolkit itself is sort of quite flexible. It's and we have sort of bits in it to make it accessible to kids, to all sorts of age groups. So the idea is so you don't have to worry. And there's sort of a dashboard where you can see the data, and you can actually on the dashboard sort of give indications of what the data means as well. So it doesn't just say like 3.2 milligrams of XYZ. It can say, you can say, well, that's good today, or, so and you can look at it over time as well. So you can see it over one day, you can do it by timescale based back from the beginning when you gather the data, or for a specific time period. So you can, I think the interesting thing with Laura's project is that change over time. So if you wanted to, you could gather lots of data, not knowing what it means, and then at the end of 6 months go, oh, actually, look here, maybe map it to global data. So you could go, well, the global patterns are showing this, and Plymouth is doing this, and are we this, so maybe you could do it on that what you call longitudinal thing, but not really having much of a clue until you've waited for a bit of time. So that could be, just could be a bit, some people might not find that quite so rewarding, not quite so direct, but that's a really like rocket sort of not rocket, how do you call it? Speedy
whistle stop.
That was it. Yeah. So we've got a budgeting. So Ben's mentioned the budget. We do have a budget in Green Minds. We've talked to Alan, Ben. We'd like to support what you're doing because it fits really well with what we're doing. So I think the reason we came today is sort of hear what you guys want to do, and then sort of have a chat and see how we could sort of resource at least the sensors and the toolkit bit, as in the practical bits of the toolkit.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine. That's brilliant. Yeah, and it had relevance for at least one of the other topics as well. So as we'll definitely be able to feedback on once we've made the decision tonight of what sort of things we'd be interested in recording. Brilliant. Okay, so we'll leave it there for that topic because we're already out of time. But thanks very much, Laura. And we now go to Kate, I believe. Have I got that right? Don't know my own itinerary. You all right there, Kate? Kate's going to talk to us about potential positive things that we can do to help rock pool wildlife. I'll stop my share.
Share my screen.
Just while Kate's sharing, thank you, Catherine. Just put a link in the chat with a bit more about the brilliant digital toolkits she's just been talking about.
Okay, so what I was going to look at was the positive impacts that human behaviours can make on the biodiversity or health of the rocky shore. Now, what we initially started looking at something different, but realised, although very exciting, wasn't replicable in both Falmouth and Plymouth. It would be a Plymouth-only thing. So we very quickly changed tack slightly. So apologies if it's not quite as in depth as it could have been, but it gives you a kind of rough idea of what we might do. And it's also quite nice because this positive impact we could, or behaviour could also tie in with some runners up in some of the topics that were really popular back which were related to invasive species. So what we suggested was potential removal of non-native species, but particularly wireweed, which is called Sargassum muticum, and there's a picture of it on there, and you might be thinking, what is wireweed? It's a Japanese algae that was introduced, I think it was first recorded in the 70s in the UK, but it's now found throughout different parts of the UK, the coast up to Scotland as well, but it's quite prevalent around the southwest. It's been transported, as the usual things are, by boat, by sort of regular flotsam jetsam and things like that. It is a brown seaweed. It's got a bit of a yellowish tint to it as well. it is extremely fast growing and tolerant to estuarine conditions as well. So it's able to live in quite far up different watercourses. It can reproduce in its first year of life, which is quite unusual for a lot of seaweeds, which tend to be much slower growing than especially some of the larger native species, such as kelp and rax. It's monogenetic, which means that it can fertilize itself. So it's self-replicating effectively. So it doesn't need another, the process is very easy for itself. It can just keep going. It impacts native algal species, so because it outcompetes it and takes up space where other native species might be able to grow, and it replaces them altogether and can replace them altogether. It's really easily dispersed, which is why it spreads so well. They have these berry-like structures that you can see on the screen there to the side, which enables it to float on top of the water. And once little bits of it, small parts of it can remain reproductively active for several weeks. So once it might reach a certain area, it attaches to rocky substances and can regrow. It also creates a dense screen type effect, which causes a shading impact, which changes the penetration of the light and can affect other organisms that are living below it. What can we do? Well, we can record the presence of the seaweed on shores, which I think is already done, but we can do for specific sites across our focus areas. We can physically remove the species and see what the impact it can have. We can monitor the coverage of the wireweed, which is especially that can be especially thick in the springtime when it grows. The spring and summer is when you'll see the most of it, and we can record what species might be present in the community, which are slightly different, which could vary depending on the thickness of the density of the coverage of the wireweed. And we can also see what species might be different or might be missing when you compare the different shores which are there. Why it might be a good one for us is it's easy to carry out, because when you're doing your standard rocky shores searches, you can see it. It's really easily identifiable because it's quite distinctive from other native species. It's easily replicatable across different seashores. It's relatively low cost because we can probably use our own recording system that we have just now. We can adapt elements of it to submit that information specifically, like we do with the other citizen science projects that we have when we do that, when we do our blue recovery days and other safaris. And it will also potentially help improve the presence of native species in the long term if we are able to measure that difference. I'm not quite the 15 minutes. As I said, it was a slight whistle-top tour as it was a bit of a last minute sort of segue to the side. So hopefully that gives you a basic idea of what the type of thing we're thinking about. Ben might have more that he can add to it. And there's certainly various different bits and pieces and papers and stuff that I can send out to people or put onto bits of information if they prefer, but my useful link slide is not complete at the moment, but I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Kate. And for any sort of comments, either specifically on the wireweed stuff or more generally on so round of applause. Well done.
I should add also that whilst we changed the direction of what we initially started looking at because it would only be applicable to Plymouth and not to something we could replicate in Falmouth, did also look into a lot of the different human behaviours, such as sort of beach cleans and using certain paths on rocky shores and things like that. However, a lot of the research and the information I could find was about the sort of negative impacts, and so again, if you use a certain path, then you're creating an artificial route in itself. So you could be causing more damage. So is it a positive behavior or not? And also that with the likes of beach cleaning, a lot of the literature that was initially looked at was all very much social science based in terms of human behavioral change and the positive impacts that it can have on the sort of pro-environmental behaviours and how that ties into conservation behaviour. But it would be an extremely difficult one because there's so many active beach cleans and people do it automatically. How we monitor it and how we would be able to determine that that was actually what was increasing biodiversity or anything like that would require much more research and in-depth sort of study than I think that we'd really be able to accomplish in the mean term. So we did look at other things, but it just this seemed to be the most easy to apply in terms of accomplishing it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the stuff you looked at, you just mentioned, was probably the original inspiration for the question, well, closer to it than the removal of invasive species. But the removal of invasive species seems much more doable to me. And wireweed seems to be the obvious candidate. I can't actually, I mean, there are a few other invasives there, but they're not typically as abundant as the wireweed in our local environments. So I don't know if
and
you
certainly
agree
they're harder to identify for people who maybe are not as used to seeing different kind of things, and they're easier to confuse with other things, whereas wireweed, as I said, is quite distinctive in its appearance. Yeah,
I mean, I know that the Cornwall Wildlife Trust do an invasive species program on based around the Pacific oysters and hitting them with hammers. I don't know if they've looked at how that work impacts on the ecosystem as a whole, but yeah, we could, as far as the wireweed are concerned, and looking at the impact, having control areas and removal areas, that's something that's been done elsewhere in the world as well, so it should be fairly easy to replicate it here.
Fran, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I just saw your hand going up.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I didn't want to butt in. But yeah, I ran the oyster project around the beaches in Falmouth.
Oh yeah.
Just as a consideration, we got a lot of negative feedback from local people and from people not wanting to join in. They just didn't like the idea of us interrupting the ecosystem or doing anything basically on the beaches. And I don't know if that would be the same for a plant. You know, there's people out there foraging every day, but they do it at unsociable hours. But it might just be a bit of a consideration with that. I'm sure if you have the right, I don't know if you have to get any sort of, you know what I mean, where you have to go to the Cornwall Wildlife. Yeah, permissions, thank you. I don't know if you need any permissions to do it. I'm sure if you have them, people will understand, but we did, and they sort of didn't understand. They just thought we were savages out there with hammers.
Yeah, I guess it is quite graphic, smacking things with hammers, isn't it?
I was going to say it's quite a graphic kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
But thanks, well, if we go down this route, then it'd be good to have more of your experience on that, because it would be quite relevant, I think. Any other comments at all? Alan?
Do you mind if I just mention something, please? Brilliant. Thanks so much for doing that, Kate. And yeah, really interesting discussions. It's just a wider comment really on this potential topic, because a long time ago when we did the first stage of this, I was deliberately trying to come up with things that were quite different. And the reason we suggested this idea was it's more the fact that we're looking for something positive, because I think it's more motivational, because there's a lot of studies, a lot of research to say how bad plastic is for wildlife, how bad sewage is for wildlife. And actually my thought behind these sort of questions, are 2 or 3 similar ones, was if we can prove or really support positive impacts, hopefully that motivates people to go out and do more of it. We found out through our discussions over last week, it's not easy to do that at all. But I just think it would be worthwhile all of us considering that, even if we choose topic that isn't this one, a question that isn't this one, maybe even the way we phrase the question, maybe the way we phrase the results, and just try to focus on the positive things, I think will be quite refreshing and might just make us stand out a bit in what we do and have longer term better effects. I think that's very similar to what you're doing with Green Minds as well.
Yeah, Cindy. Do you prefer Cindy or Maria? I'm calling you Cindy.
Cindy, please,
I thought that was the case.
It's like it might
We've
not
not
be
met
Twitter,
before,
so I
but
can't get rid of
I
it.
thought I'd check that.
I was wondering if there's anything like that can be done with the wire width after. So for example, I don't know, either like crafts or like I don't remember whether it's like edible or not, like something else, so that the collection wire width can be used for, so it doesn't like get wasted.
That's a good idea.
I can really respond to that. It's possible to compost it potentially. But like, you know, how well that would be caveated on someone having a compost that would be large enough to take that amount of material. There is a slight caveat, and it sort of follows on from Francis's point, but it is actually, if you pick up or like, you know, or find an invasive species, in a lot of cases it can be illegal to release it or like put it back into the wild. And if we are picking up particularly like an invasive species, it actually can be illegal to leave it lying around on the beach. So we would actually have to physically remove it and destroy it in some official capacity, which may be beyond our the capabilities, or you know, it may say you have to incinerate it or something, opposed to just put it in your compost. But it's a potential to compost the seaweed and like. But
have you got any comments on that, Kate?
I didn't quite have an opportunity to kind of look at what we could do with it afterwards, but certainly Chris was right, we wouldn't be able to, if we sort of physically removed it, we'd have to responsibly dispose of it in a way. So whether or not that's through kind of providing it as something you can compost, but again, we'd need to make sure it kind of goes away from watercourses, that because with it being a more estuarine or tolerant of estuarine environments, that it could very easily kind of find its way, and its ease of distribution. We'd have to make sure that it was something that was done responsibly, and certainly with the terms of art and anything else, I'm not sure about how about its edibility or anything like that, but certainly something we could look into. I can have a wee squiz while we're looking. So
yeah, in my reading I did this afternoon on it, I didn't read any of the papers, but when I searched for the invasive wireweed, sargassum muscum stuff, almost most of the recent papers were actually looking at potential uses of it, which was quite interesting. There were quite a few different things like cosmetics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think from what I sort of briefly saw one of them, it's not that great to eat or have any sort of culinary use, but there are other potential uses. Brilliant. Okay, thanks again, Kate. And I'm going to take Alan's words fully on board as I pass over to Christoph, who's going to be talking to us about the amazing positive effects of not having sewage in your seawater when you're looking at rock pools.
thanks, Ben. I will share my screen.
Christoph, you're very, very quiet. I don't know if you can adjust that at your end, or just
yeah.
pick
Let
up.
me. What microphone
Thanks.
am I using? How's that? Is that better or worse?
Much better.
Cool. Okay. One of the microphones I use has a tendency to drop out. So please interrupt me if it keeps dropping out of somewhere. I'm hoping it isn't this one, but again, just interrupt me as soon as there's a problem. Cool. So you will see PowerPoint, and can you see full screen PowerPoint? No. Can you? Where are we going? No. Can you see full screen PowerPoint? Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, great. Just minimize it away. Yeah, okay, so as Ben said, I've been looking at, or with the help of Ben and Jamie, potentially looking at the question around is the rock pool communities of the UK affected by local sewage outflows. I've tried to not put any nasty images of sewage alike. So yes, as Ben has put out, I am mainly just having this emoji image, assuming because most people haven't eaten yet and also I don't really want to put off people rock pooling. Like I don't want to take away from this to say we shouldn't go rock pooling or not putting our hands in the water. But yeah, so that's the reason for the poop emoji. Cool. So I'm going to give a quick, if I can go on to the next slide, a quick background of like why we have such a massive problem with sewage in the UK. The main reason is the sewage systems in the UK were designed in the Victorian periods, where you basically have one pipe going from your toilet or from all our toilets all the way to the filtering station or to the sewage treatment plant. And what happens is the water you flush down your toilet and all your sinks and your waste gets sent to the waste treatment plant, and it gets filtered out, and the water continues on and goes into outlets such as rivers and the like. Unfortunately, when these systems are designed, they were also attached to storm drains. So if the grids, the grates and the like that you see in the side of the road, they are essentially connected to the same pipes that go from your toilet to these sewage filtration systems. And that means that if you have a very large storm event, there is more water that going into these pipes that the sewage filtration systems can take, and they literally have to divert the water around the filtration systems and straight into the rivers. That is the way the water companies describe it, and I'm going to try not be too political, but there is a lot of evidence now that it is not just due to large storm events where this sewage is diverted into rivers. It's actually sewage outflows things occur a lot and quite frequently when there has been no excess rain in the system. These are sort of like the facts go around. So thousands and thousands of times water companies discharge raw sewage into river systems. The worst casing one is the United Utilities. That's the one that serves Manchester and Cumbria. But then for us, most people here were looking at Southwest water, and it's still a considerable amount of times that just raw sewage is pumped straight into river systems or straight into the marine environment. And there is a fascinating podcast by The Guardian, and it's also just an article if you'd like to read it, all about basically the one guy, or I think the two guys who figured this out. They were two retired physics lecturers who sat down and used their skills to basically train an AI to discover when these outflows were happening. And it was a huge scandal. It's absolutely fascinating, but this is basically two citizen scientists went out and discovered this pure scale of how much sewage was being discharged into the UK river. So it's definitely well worth a listen. So that's the scale of the problem. And I think we can just in generally agree that poop is bad. We don't want it actually in the environment. I'll quickly go through and just explain why it's bad, or why well, there's lots of different reasons why it's bad. But the main ones we're sort of thinking about in the cases of the environment is poo and waste contains a lot of different compounds that are actually really, quote, beneficial for life. So nitrate and phosphates, these are all molecules and compounds that animals and plants need to live and thrive. What happens is, though, if you get an excess of normally these chemicals that are in very low quantities in ecosystems, then you basically get explosions of life, or explosions of typically animals like algae they skyrocket in abundance, they cover over everything, and then all of those animals die simultaneously at once. That causes the oxygen levels in the environment to complete, and basically creates a whole dead zone if it gets really bad. So it's this kind of interesting dynamic where sewage actually is putting in compounds into the environment that actually, you know, life would really like to have, but when it comes into these excessive quantities, it actually have these very detrimental effects. So there's a lot of research that goes on to do, particularly with rivers and the marine world, but there's not that much research going into intertidal animals. Like, you know, how is the sewage going into our ecosystem? How does it affect these wonderful animals that we love to explore and find on our rocky coasts? And this is a potential question that is open debate or is unanswered in the UK. We don't really have a definitive answer to how big an impact sewage outflow is for the intertidal communities. Some potential ideas of how we could sort of go about this as citizen science is now the Rockpool project has these all fantastic, amazing sites that we've been going back to routinely over the last 5 years or so. And we can actually look and see, okay, where are these sewage outflows going? So this is the south coast of Falmouth, and we have all these survey sites going along here. And actually there is a sewage pipe sticking out just to the south of it. And last year, it had an overspill of 40 times, an accumulative of about 27 hours. That is a bit of a dodgy number. No one really has like a definitive quantitative number for the amount of sewage. So 27 hours could be 27 hours of a trickle, or it could be 27 hours of an absolute torrent. It's very difficult to get hold of data on that, but we have these sort of rough numbers of how much sewage is going over sort of long periods of time. And in theory, because we have all these sites going along, these sites should be at a nice gradient away from this outflow of sewage. So we can test for hypotheses that as you get further away from the outflows, do communities change, or can we measure tangible benefits or negative impacts of how close you are to this sewage outflow? The measurement of the compounds of in sewage, so these nitrates and phosphates, is actually quite easy to do, because a lot of fish tanks require you to measure nitrate levels and phosphate levels. So there are quick off-the-shelf tests that we can use, and we can get citizen science to hand out and get people to measure over time to get really nice quantitative measurements. That won't necessarily be a direct measurement of human waste outflow. It will also be linked to things like agricultural runoff and other ways that phosphates and nitrates can get into the environment. However, from an animal or ecosystem perspective, it doesn't really matter where the phosphate or the nitrate is coming from. It just matters the total amount there. And if we find an impact of excessive nitrate or excessive phosphates, an impact of those excessive compounds on the community of animals or plants and the like at these sites, then we can just say, well, okay, if we cut out human sewage going, that would cut the amount of nitrate, that would cut the amount of phosphate, and that would be a good positive outcome in general. I've given a photo of Falmouth here. That's because Falmouth has like a very nice sort of gradient of, we have a sewage outflow here, we have a gradient going all the way along, and we can nicely sort of test along. Looking at Plymouth, we haven't quite figured out a gradient in those ways, but we could still go out and test it, test the levels of nitrates in Plymouth, and if we get an idea of, okay, what are the background levels, or what is the gradient that nitrate has a negative impact in Falmouth, we can just transpose that to Plymouth and go, okay, well, Plymouth levels is this amount, therefore we can reasonably accept that this is the effect it's going to have. And there's just quite a lot of different sewage outflow points in Plymouth, and if you want to go and figure out where they are, The Rivers Trust has a really nice, good map of where they all are and the total amount that's gone on. Cool. I think that was my slide. So yeah, I'm going to open up discussion. That was kind of like a rough idea of like, you know, what we're going to do. I do really need to say thank you to Ben and Jamie, because that they did a lot of the research that went into this as well. So but thank you to you both as well. And I'll just stop sharing my screen here.
Thank you very much, Christoph.
I have no idea how long that took, so
No, you're fine. We've got
10 minutes. I actually don't know.
We've got a couple of minutes for questions. Can I just quickly ask you something? I've got no idea about this myself. Your great schematic made me think of it. Under normal circumstances, where raw sewage isn't being pumped out and it's going through the treatment system, it still comes out the same pipe, doesn't it? In the end, the filtered stuff still goes out the same pipe.
The filtered stuff is quite often removed for manure, right? It's taken
okay.
for farming waste or you know is used in. I mean, I'm not sure.
But there'll still be water that comes through.
Yes,
yes,
there might still be
high
water
in
on,
nutrients.
that water should be, because I guess the term is treated sewage, and it may not. Entirely free of phosphates, but it will definitely reduced and the pipe is not going from the toilet to the river.
No, you'd hope it has some impact
of some time in there, which is in general good.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah. Sorry to hold the questions there. Any questions from anyone else? Please do raise your hand. I've lost my Mentimeter screen, so here it is. No, nothing on there at the moment. Anyone got any questions? Cindy.
I was wondering if you have any information about where oceanic currents are more likely to transport that sewage around.
That's an excellent question. I have worked a bit on ocean currents. I don't. So the computer simulations that you need to do sort of that small scale is very, very complicated, or not something we could, I don't think would have been done. In general, we would just have to assume that, yeah, as close as you can get to the closer you get, the more you increase. There is a potential that, yeah, there is a current that is always taking the water in a certain direction. I think at this small local scale, you wouldn't see that. You do see this at sort of a larger scale.
Yeah.
But again, short of one of us doing a degree in physics and doing those calculations itself, or then there may be navigational charts, that out there that say the prevailing direction or the like. But I'm assuming it is variable enough that it is on average just goes with. This will be what we have to go for and
yeah. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Local people might have an idea, Christoph. Do you think if you just speak to people, like say, what ways does stuff tend to drift in the bay and that kind of stuff? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, from my swimming at Gilly, I can't specifically say you get dragged one way or another, because it was it's a very sheltered bay, isn't it? So I assume it is in general reasonably stagnant, which is not a great word for describing our favourite rock pulling place.
Any other questions at all?
And Catherine's got her hand up.
Oh, Catherine, I missed that. Sorry.
I just had I was just wondering, you showed all those sort of measurement points along the shoreline, but would you actually be able to, I mean, I'm just wondering, because with following on from the previous question, would you actually be able to get a good idea of the impact, because it might not happen along the I mean, would you have to go on a boat, is what I'm wondering. And then just to pick up again, I was just thinking about what Alan said about focusing on the positive. I think if you did measure all the way along, you'd probably get most of the time fairly good water quality. So you could actually show that actually how good the water quality is generally, but also show what the impact of that sewage outlet had at specific points or times. So it might be a bit more a positive story, because I get the feeling that there's this sort of, the unknown means that people just think that there's sewage in the water all the time, but you might be able to show that it's not all the time, and actually if they stop doing it, it could be the positive effects could remain.
Yeah.
But I think that that's a big potential side benefit of the project, actually, if we were to go this way, Catherine, because businesses in Falmouth, I mean, it's a big issue in Falmouth. I don't know if someone can fill me in on the situation in Plymouth, but businesses that are using the water a lot don't really know whether they should stop operating under certain conditions. All they get is alerts from surface against sewage, which is brilliant because they didn't used to get that. That geographically, it's not very precise, the information that they give, and no one knows how much has gone in the water, how far it's spread, that kind of thing. So I think it would get a lot of interest. I think at both sides, really.
It's definitely a hot topic in Plymouth too, with the huge wild swimming community now, and even local MPs campaigning about water being of bathing quality. So it'd be good because it potentially offers profile for what we're doing and for the ROC project as a whole. So there's extra benefits.
Brilliant. Okay, I'll just
I was going to quickly say, but I mean,
you said Robin's comment there.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
So we got a comment from Robin. I was just going to pass that on if you've seen it. Saying that there's probably tidal atlases for Plymouth and Falmouth, which will show the currents through the tidal cycle. That's good to know. So we should be able to. People like the MBA and stuff might be able to help us out with that. So thanks for mentioning that, Robin. So what were we going to say, Christoph?
I was going to say, I mean, it may be with if sewage has a detrimental impact at a certain level, it may be that we as citizen scientists don't really see that, because if there is a level that it gets to which is bad enough, then we just don't go rock pooling in those areas, right? Because you get to that area like, well, I'm not hanging around here. This is real. There's no rock pool wildlife. It's really grim. So that could be a potential limit as well.
Okay.
We only go and experience rock pooling in places where it's good and sort of sewage free, because but that's a self-selecting thing, as we don't want to go rock pooling where the effects of sewage have really been felt already.
Well, we might find out. I know we should be on break now, but I don't want to ignore Sarah. I've only just seen that you got your digital hand up, Sarah. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, is there any baseline data, as in has anyone in the past done any measurements on the water that we could work from, use the data and work from it?
Do you want to take that one, Christoph?
I mean, I don't know specifically for nitrates and phosphates in rock pools, and that could be definitely something that we as citizens are the first people to sort of go out and directly measure that. And there are long-term studies on, particularly do with sort of water quality, where the government is required by law to monitor the water quality over a certain time. That tends to be around the amount of E. coli and the like in the water. But it is potentially that we can do some more research and try and find, okay, well, 10 years ago someone did a in detail study of the phosphate levels in Plymouth or the like.
There'll be quite a lot out there, Sarah. I think the Environment Agency will be quite a rich source of data of whatever sort of nitrite or ammonia, whatever we decide to study. There'll be lots of that data which will be quite intermittent through the years, but it'll be useful as a baseline. I think you're right. I don't know. It'll be very difficult to find out their methodology, and whether that matters or not, I don't know, but perhaps the methodologies don't matter too much. Cool. Al, so we're supposed to be on a break now. Can you wait until we come back, or did you want to say something just briefly before we go?
It's just very quickly, it was to Catherine in the Green Minds team. I know you said you're not 100% sure about what tools you can put in the digital toolkit. Do you think you might be able to put some in that would measure this sort of stuff? Was it nitrite and phosphate?
Phosphate, and the paper I read actually said not nitrate, but other nitrite and ammonia and other sort of nitrogen-based nutrients, I think.
So I know the sensors we've looked at the moment, they measure more like water quality, which doesn't seem to cover the pollution bit quite so much. So, but I thought what was interesting, what Christoph said about the cheap ones, and whether we can get one, so we might have to get a more expensive one that covers like that specific thing, but maybe it's a mix of cheap ones and a couple of expensive ones that you use as sort of more like a control. So it's, to be honest, the water quality bit, we've just to give an example, we've got air quality sensors in Plymouth that measure particulate matter in the air. And that's been that works quite well. So I'm sure there must be ones, but it's really figuring out what it is you need to measure, because there's so many things you can measure about the water. I mean, the one I'm looking at, it measures like oxygen content, turbidity, suspended solids. So that might be the thing, but don't think it measures nitrates as such. So yes, I think so. Not quite sure.
Okay, but I think they could be relevant as well, but we can have a look at a close look at it. Okay, we better take a 5-minute break now. During that 5-minute break, if I can encourage you to rest your eyes from the screen, but also have a good think about which way you're going to vote, because you'll have to vote one of 3 ways when we come back. We'll have a bit of time to discuss it before we do. But thanks very much again for Christoph and Peyton and Laura for putting together those great presentations. I feel like I want to do all 3, but I'm afraid we cannot. I'm just going to turn my screen off and I'll mute for 5 minutes.
Should we say back at 1:15, Ben?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Yeah. We might overrun by 5 minutes, but Okay, we're back in the room. Give everybody a chance to return. Are you? Is Laura here? Back from your break, Laura?
Yep.
You are. I asked because you posted a question on the chat, which we can just chat about whilst we're waiting for everyone to come back. If you are showing your screen, can you switch it on when you get back? So I've got some idea of if everyone's back or not. Yeah. So Laura, you were asking about particular species that are likely to be affected by the sewage. I think
yeah,
with
just wondered if we had any idea if there were previous studies done, on this kind of thing at all or not.
Yeah, there have been. Some of the best stuff has been done in Australia and the Sydney area, and one of the papers had a full list of species or taxa. A lot of them are in similar genera to what we have here as well. Like they're not that dissimilar by the looks of it. So I guess we might be able to find equivalence here. I think it's similar with the climate change stuff, though, although we have got British species, papers that have said British species that are most likely to be affected as well. So with both of those topics, we could consider a specific subset of species which are likely to be impacted.
Sure, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I was just wondering, we're talking about across the gradient, what exactly we'd be sort of keeping an eye on across that gradient. So that sounds good. Yeah.
Cool. And you mentioned you've got a bit of experience with the test kits as well, and they're potentially harmful chemicals. So good to have you on board if we go down that route.
I think purely in terms of when you said we could use them in terms of citizen science thing, I think if we're asking people to do them, we might need to consider some kind of training or the health and safety, just because I've used them in personal and also in professional settings, and the professional settings, you have to be wearing gloves and trained to do them and stuff like that, just because there are some chemicals in them. They're not that bad, but yeah, might be something to consider.
And they wouldn't, we could take the samples and take them, we wouldn't have to do it on the beach, I'm guessing.
No, I'm wondering whether if we were to do it, whether it would be better to have team members and rangers actually testing the samples, and whether everyone could collect and then they could be tested in a batch later on, which would probably cut down on the amount of test kits you would need to buy. I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah,
I'm sure we'd work something out there. Cool, thanks, Laura. It looks like everyone's back now, so welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a nice short break. So now we're talking about decision time. So over the next 10 minutes or so, we're each of us going to have to make up our mind. I shall leave this slide on. Can you all see that slide? Let me just see if I can access it myself. There we are. I'm not on there now. I'm not going to show the results as they come in, because that could influence people's thinking. So we'll leave that for the time being. Can I ask, has anyone made up their mind already? And maybe we can go to you, and you might, if you don't mind, explaining your thinking. People playing their cards close to their chest.
Well, have you made up your mind, Ben?
I have. I was really reluctant to say my opinion before everyone else's, though, because yeah, I don't. I think I made up my mind, definitely. I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet, to answer your question in a very evasive way. Have you not, then, Fran? We're gonna have to soon.
I had, but then I had a dream about another one the other
wow,
day.
that's so inspirational. You had a dream about one of these three, did you?
Yeah.
What did you dream about then? Tell us that.
I don't know if that's what people want to hear, but I dreamt.
I mean, about this specific dream.
Not if it's a sewage one.
No, that is what it was. So.
Was it a nightmare then, or was it like a positive dream?
A bit of both. I saw a scorpion fish that was alive, but then a lot of fish that were dead.
So you're not joking, are you? This really did happen.
There's a comment come through from Robin. Quite interesting.
Yeah, I just saw that come through. That is interesting, isn't it? So Robin is saying that there has been some work removing gasum, which is wireweed, in northeast Kent in partnership with Natural England. I wasn't aware of that at all, and be interesting to find out more about that, whether we go down that way or not really.
Definitely.
Now, I'm going to put you on the spot now. Okay, Vicky was talking. Brilliant. Let's hear from you, Vicky. You were saying you were uncharacteristically quiet, so now's your opportunity to right that wrong.
I've had a very long day.
Oh,
no, I'm stuck between two. Like I'm not quite.
Which two are you stuck between?
Well, I don't know if I should say because no one's.
Yes, you should say.
The sewage and the positive human impacts, because I think the wireweed one's really interesting in that it'd be quite maybe it's just me as being a layman and not a scientist, it's quite quantifiable. Like I can see how we could, remove wireweed and reassess before and after and whatnot. The sewage one, I'm still quite unsure how what we do with that. I think that's where but I find that interesting because I think it's really important. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, you raised an interesting point in terms of, I guess what you're saying is that we could show the sewage, or no, we could show the lack of sewage at one end of the beach is having a real positive effects on the wildlife. But so what? Like is that what you're saying? Like what can we actually do to improve the situation?
Not so much that. I'm just not sure what the sort of parameters are that we'll use yet. I mean, I know that's the next stage. So perhaps I'm just thinking too far ahead. Whereas the wireweed thing is quite specific and quite yeah, I feel like I can get a grasp on that better as a layman.
Yeah. Well, I'll come to you in a minute. I don't want to sort of necessarily discourage you from the wireweed one, but the papers which have done it have been in Spain, and they have not shown that it has any positive impacts on the mainly algal canopy. There are papers which are showing that the wireweed has a negative impact, sometimes subtidally. It's also in North America, so I think the North Americans studied that, and also under experimental conditions. But when they've actually done the removal, that there's 2 or 3 papers, and they didn't show much at all, really. But they haven't been in the UK, and it could easily be a different situation in the UK.
I think Catherine had her hand up first, actually. If you
okay,
like
so
to go, Catherine.
Well, it was just a thought, just to keep in the back of your minds, because I can't remember who mentioned about baseline data, but there's a bit that runs through all of these about this sort of idea of having some sort of base, and I think there's probably potentially quite a good idea about some background stuff that enables you to do whichever one people choose, to almost thinking about, well, how do you just measure some things more generally, so that when so just a thought that maybe you need to consider for all of them is that idea that you need to know what more generally what's happening, so that you can sort of see what the changes are.
yeah, a good idea. There's quite a bit of stuff out there. Al.
Definitely, yeah. I think just a wider thing for everyone to consider, if you don't mind, please, is like Ben alluded to in the beginning, this is part of the Blue Recovery Project, which is the idea is to work with certain local communities who our research show don't necessarily interact with the local beaches or wildlife. And so a big part of this is making whatever we choose fun and engaging, easy to do, and repeatable, really. So it is a very exciting opportunity scientifically, but there's far more to it than that as well. So Ben and I and Kate, we've been on the phone all week about this sort of thing, and it really does come down to how we're going to do it. Are people going to enjoy it? Is it going to get boring if they're doing the same thing over and over again? And therefore, am I allowed to be the first one to say what I'm going to vote for, or is that going to spoil
go ahead, yeah.
Well, therefore, despite the fact one of the other ones was actually my idea in the first place, I'm not going to vote for my idea. It was a rubbish idea. But the way Christoph presented with the map of Falmouth and the different zones, being able to do a rock pool biodiversity survey at different zones, repeat them, I think would be fascinating for a lot of people, because you're almost going to see, if there are changes straight away, you're going to notice that and be excited, and then hopefully have your own questions about, well, I wonder if this is because of the waste pollution, and particularly if we could use the boxes that Green Minds have offered that we might be able to use, and then we go and look at the data that collects, and if there's a correlation, all of a sudden, for people who aren't scientists, that's an incredibly accessible and interesting way into the world of citizen science. So that's why I'm going to vote for that one. But to be honest, all of them excite me. So like you said, we could do all of them.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Sal. One thing I might ask all of you now is we've heard a bit about two of the ideas in this discussion, and we haven't talked much about the climate change, ocean acidification side of things. Is anyone who wasn't involved in putting that presentation together like to fight the corner for that particular topic, whether or not you're looking to vote for it or not?
I didn't do the presentation, but I was in that group.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, you could, by all means, go ahead. So
I was thinking that maybe this could become, because it is a long-term study, it could become a longer-term study if the funding was renewed, if we were lucky enough to have this not just a 2-year project, but like a 4-year project that once every 4 months or 3 months, we could do one of the brilliant ideas Laura came up with, measuring gastropod shell thickness. We don't necessarily have to restrict ourselves to just looking at one study topic, but this could be incorporated as well, I thought. Would be quite good, because then we've got longer time. That's massively hoping that the funding's renewed, obviously.
But I guess whichever way we go, we'd hope that it could lead, especially if we do a good job of it, and not just scientifically, but like Alan was saying, in terms of engaging the local community, that we can convince people to give us some more money to do similar stuff in the future, basically. So let's hope so. Okay, I think we're ready to sort of say that it's make your mind up time now, unless anybody's got anything else they'd like to say.
I think I'll just add thank you to everyone who's contributed. Ben, particularly, you've put an awful lot of blood, sweat and tears into this. The 3 leaders, everyone who joined the group, but also it's just brilliant to see new people we've never met joining in and, giving up your own time to be interested in what we're doing. So thanks everybody.
Thank you, Al. It's not going to be the end of it here. We've still got a little bit after this bit, but thank you all the same. That's very nice of you. I can see we've got 9 votes, but we've got a lot more than 9 people here. If anyone's having any trouble with Mentimeter and getting on it and hasn't said, do say so now, otherwise you won't get a chance to vote. Got 11 people voted. We've got, so hopefully Kate's had to go, unfortunately, but she says she can vote on the move.
If you're really struggling with Mentimeter, you could also just send directly to me or Ben your vote on the chat on Zoom.
We'll just have to add it into the total that's shown on Mentimeter, won't we? 14. Do you know how many we've got in here, Al?
Nope.
19. 19. 16, 70.
Have you remembered to do it yourself, Ben?
I've done it myself, yes. Might have to leave it at 17. I don't know who hasn't voted. It's not an easy one, is it? All right.
Have you got a clear margin of victory already?
I don't know. Ready? It says press on my screen. You can probably see it. It says press H to show results. Let's have a look. Blimey, have a look at that. Wow. So we have a clear winner. So probably it doesn't matter. We only had 18. So one person hasn't voted, but if it's any consolation, one person, I'm afraid it probably wouldn't make too much odds which way you went. Well, that's nice.
Actually, Robin's just mentioned and said why she hasn't voted, or he hasn't. I'm not sure, actually, Robin, sorry. why they haven't voted, because it's not their geographical area. So that's fair enough.
Oh, it's nice of you, Robin. Thanks very much. And I didn't mention, I really should have done, that we would hope, even though the Blue Recovery Project is focused on Falmouth and Plymouth, that and that's what we'll have to focus on when we initially set up this project, that it'll be something that we could set up that could be replicated in other areas, if people have got the resources to do so. Or I haven't read your comment fully yet, but if we can get funding to move to other areas in the future, then that would be amazing as well. And the other thing that I neglected to say at the start that I should have done is to say thank you very much to everybody who gave a donation. So that when signing up for Eventbrite, we'll be making that giving that opportunity to people. Don't feel obliged to at all, but all of the money that's donated on our online sessions will be ring-fenced to going towards this particular project. So it will be helping us achieve our goals of looking at the positive impact of not having sewage in our rock pools. I think it's exciting to go through that, and I can only echo everything that Alan just said. That it's been brilliant to go through this process, and it's just the start. What comes next? There we go. So we ideally want to start data collection, I would say in February, really. Maybe in March, the absolute latest. We, as I mentioned, we have monthly beach days. So before our monthly beach day this month, now we're in December, it has a very Christmas theme, and we're not going to do anything apart from have fun and find as much cool stuff as we can and eat mince pies. But in between now and the January beach days, we've got our January beach day scheduled provisionally for the 22nd of January, I think, something like that. Myself, hopefully, along with Laura and Kate and Christoph and anybody else that would like to get involved, we need to define a very specific research question along the lines of the study that Christoph was outlining in his presentation that we'll actually seek to answer next year. And then we can use that to design our study in detail. And then we'll be communicating that. I think that there are a lot of people, I would assume in Plymouth as well, but definitely in Falmouth, who are looking at this issue already. And so I would like quite early in the new year to have another online workshop along these lines, but to invite people locally, or if it's online, then they can come from anywhere in the world, I suppose, to give us the benefit of their expertise. So when we're designing the project, we can do it in the best way possible, and have a lot of fun in the year ahead. Thank you very much for everybody for taking part. Anybody got anything else you'd like to say before we sign off? Thank you, Christoph, for the digital clap. Brilliant. Okay. Well, thanks very much for spending your evening with us. And just if anybody's got any sort of further follow-ups you'd like to get in contact with, there's our email address there, bluerecovery@rockproject.co.uk. And if you're not already following us on social media, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So make sure you do, and you can contact us through there as well. Take care, everybody. Hope to see as many as possible at our December beach days.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers, Christoph.
Cheers. I just thought I'd hang on and see.
I'm glad you did. That was pretty cool. Well, I was almost going to say congratulations, but the whole point was it wasn't a competition. So
No.
Competition or not, it was pretty comprehensive in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a bit bad for like, you know, Laura. I mean, I was really excited for the climate. I mean, that's what I work on, right?
Yeah, I feel a bit bad for Laura because I mean, I don't think she'll mind so much, but
right.
But I mean, she's put in quite a bit of effort to come up with some ideas of what we could do when it's actually quite tricky to work out what we can do. So she basically gave it that particular topic the best shot it could get, really. So I think we could have done something there, but this is what people want to do, and this is what we were talking about at the very. As I was saying to the others, that like right at the very start we said, oh, we could do that, and then we've gone through all this massive process and we are doing that, but the benefit is that people feel like they've been part of that decision-making process. So I think
yeah. I mean, like more people are right, people we didn't know would come today, so more people involved, expanding and whatever. Yeah, it's definitely not
cool. All right, well, enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll be in touch when I've sort of thrashed out exactly how this other stuff is going to develop.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Christoph.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye.